Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakak Pradash, double honors to the apostles and the others, great millstone, for teaching us truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick on Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. For today's topic, I just wanted to do a bit more of a continuation of this topic I had about examples of our forefathers who basically, how they say in the world, put women in their place. This is something that, young brothers, you might go through, with your experience, with women, right? This is something that, because we interact with them, this is just a character building thing, because, like I said in my previous lesson, we understand that this culture that we're coming out from has been very, very toxic. We basically became, a bunch of degenerate plants. So what happens when a plant is basically like a degenerate? You start to prune it. You start to get rid of a lot of things, excess, like an actual plant, for example, you get rid of the some of the dead leaves, offshoots, those things that you're holding on to, that's actually not actually being fruitful, right? So as a matter of fact, Paul said, be transformed. Let me get that first. I didn't have this, but this is Romans 12:2, and it says, "And be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of the Most High," right? So, we're not transformed into the ways of this world, because the ways of this world, their mindset is to basically, as Israelite men, is to basically kind of just tolerate things, right? And just because they don't want to lose that sexual access, so basically they don't actually learn how to be, men, as Paul said in I think it's in Corinthians somewhere, when it comes to understanding, be men, to roughly paraphrase, right? So, our men don't actually have a proper template of what it's like to be men, because their templates go back to, for example, folks like Drake, go back to Jay-Z, go back to, Lil Nas X, all these degenerates that you see in Hollywood, right? That's why the scriptures talk about how the leaders of the people cause them to err, right? So when our men see that, they don't see a righteous template of how to actually conduct themselves, And Esau has a hand in this also, by defacing, the true image of our Lord and Savior, Yahushai, right? So they think it's okay just to tolerate, unacceptable behavior, right? As it says in Revelation about how the Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations. Part of that deception, is how the Savior looked, and the manner and the characteristics of how he actually conducted themselves, right? So that trickles down not just unto Yahushai, but the rest of our forefathers also, right? That trickles down onto the rest of our forefathers also, right? And then the last lesson I did was mostly going into Yahushai's story, how he corrected his mother, right? There's a way to do it, but even that, he still had to check his mother as well, because, and that's something, because we come out, like I said before, we come out from a culture that is constantly contaminated and perpetuates women worship, right? Of course, if you have a woman, you try your best to actually, care about her and guide her, but sometimes they step out of line, right? Sometimes they might be sincere, but sometimes they're sincere and they're incorrect at the same time, right? So what I wanted to do I just wanted to get two more examples, of this and within the scriptures, within our forefathers. And again, this is just character building, really. That's all that this is, because I myself, I had this, issue, as well. I'm not saying this to be hard on brothers, but this is just something to be cognizant about, and this is something to basically develop, as I should say. You know what I'm saying? So let me start with Job's story. I'll start at verse 6 here, and I'll read to 10. So this is Job 2 and 6, and it says, And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Excuse me. And it says in verse 9, Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse the Most High and die. Right? So this is what his wife is saying to him, right? So he basically, Job is basically being afflicted, and honestly, you know what? If you look at the perspective from the woman, right? So, for women that actually do this, you shouldn't provoke a man that is in distress. As a matter of fact, let me read that. Because if you understand, and I know women are not deprived of understanding and wisdom, but like if you're a woman and you're listening and you're striving to be, a decent, woman that fears the Lord, if you see your man do, that happening to him, don't provoke his distress. You're making it worse. You're supposed to be a pillar of rest, not a thorn in his side. Right? And that's what this woman was here. This is, I'll go back to the story just real quick. This is Sirach chapter 4, verse 2. It says, Make not an hungry soul sorrowful, neither provoke a man in his distress. Add not more trouble to a heart that is vexed, and defer not to give him that is in need. Right? So don't provoke him like that. Women, if you see your man's going through distress, be a pillar of rest. Don't actually provoke him, do something comforting, give him something, try and, treat him, right? But, Job's wife here was just basically being a demon, let me just put it like that, right? But, and I just wanted to make that point, in case, if you're a sincere woman and you're listening. But let me go back to the story, but here's really the point. This is I'll read verse 9 again. And it says, Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse the Most High and die. Right? Her mind says like, forget this power that you serve. Right? This is verse 10. But he said unto her, this is what Job said, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good in the hand of the Most High, Yahweh Bashmel Shai, and shall not receive evil, right? Because we understand the Lord is a balanced power. He controls both sides, right? You receive good, you receive evil. You know what I'm saying? So all these things come from the Lord, right? But the woman, she didn't understand that. Yes, we know when women weren't given, all these different heavy oracles and understanding and so on and so forth. But, it shows you that she didn't regard that. She was living, as they say in this world, she was living her soft life. She was living her best life, you know what I'm saying? But the moment, Job's started to be afflicted, she all that prosperity of her mind went out the window. She's just thinking about herself, right? So This is what Job had to say. He had to, he had to respectfully, he had to check her, right? Because she was being out of line, right? Um, so the next example, let me go here. Oh, it's not Kings. I'm sorry. That's Samuel. So this next example here goes into our forefather King David. So this is after he recovered the Ark of the Covenant, right? So, and he was, basically this is like a joyous, just to kind of paint the atmosphere of what's going on. David recovers the Ark of the Covenant. He starts to offer, certain offerings. He made sure his people were, they're well taken care of. Everybody's good. This is the mood, right? And David danced for the Lord, right? You remember he's a dancer. You know what I'm saying? So, this is 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 16. And it says that the ark of the Lord came into the city of David. Michal, Saul's daughter. So that's that's his. I believe that was his first wife, if I'm not mistaken, in his story. This is the wife that he married right after what's it called, the slaying of Goliath, right? So it says Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in all her heart. And they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord, right? So, just a little side tangent, when it comes to peace offerings are one of those, kind of like those Thanksgiving appreciative, sort of offerings that you offer. And then basically what happens is, you offer this particular sacrifice, and then portion of this sacrifice would be given to the priest to eat, right? Remember, because they didn't have substance like that, so they'll be given the I think it's the thigh and the shoulder, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you'll find that in the book of Leviticus. Anyways, the point is, this is a kind of offering where other people are enjoying the portions of this sacrifice, right? So this is a joyous, it's a joyous moment, right? So it says here, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Yahweh Bashimoshai of hosts. This is verse 19, and it says, and he dealt among the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, as well to the women as men, every one a cake of bread, a piece of good flesh, a good piece of flesh, and a flagon of wine. So all the people departed, every one to his house, right? So everybody, King David, he makes sure his people, his peeps, the people under him, they're taken care of, right? They got this bread, they got some wine, they're able to enjoy themselves, right? So this is verse 20, and here's the what it gets interesting. And it says, then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how glorious. So this is what she's saying. This is how glorious the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the vain fellows, shamelessly uncovered himself. Right? So she's talking smack. Right? Look at this. This is the joyous mood, right? David's beating down these heathens. They're bringing up their substance. I think that's in, I believe, the last chapter or the next couple of chapters, if I'm not mistaken. But this is the mindset. This is the building up of this, the kingdom, right? Recovering the ark of the Lord, and here it is. Everybody's taken care of, and she's trying to sour the moment. Take this in, verse 21. David said to Michal, it was before the Lord, which chose me before thy father, before all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore will I play before the Lord. I will yet be more vile than thus. I will be base in mine own sight, and of the sight of the maidservants which thou hast spoken of, them which I be had in honor, right? So, I want to continue to basically dance. I want to continue to actually express, be himself. You know what I'm saying? He's in a joyous moment, and then this woman is trying to come, and then she's trying to sour the moment, right? So that's what King David said. He's like, like, listen, I will continue to be more vile because you don't seem to appreciate. Like, here it is, a woman, you're married to a king, and you're trying to sour that moment. You know what I'm saying? So this is verse 23, and it says, therefore Michal the daughter of Saul had no child unto the day of her death, right? So she didn't have any children, right? So, and think about that in the ancient times. It was a vastly different time. Women didn't go to school and go off to university and college and all that kind of stuff. Their primary role was to actually help to bring forth children and nurture their children, right? And make sure they were, they're well groomed and stuff like that. Look over the certain affairs in the household, But, this is a shame. A woman, she's able to have children, but she doesn't die. She dies without children. That's a shame, right? And she's speaking so vilely of the king, right? So, it shows you that King David's mindset. He didn't take that from this woman here. She was just being out of line, right? Here it is a joyous moment. Like, imagine you as a man, you come home from a long day of work, maybe the Lord blessed you with some more, whatever it is, some more money, you got a little, maybe a new vehicle or something, you know what I mean? And then you come home, and then the woman is she's just trying to rain on your parade, right? You're already as much hell as you catch, as a man of the Lord. The woman is trying to rain on that parade, right? So, this is the kind of mentality, is not to actually accept that kind of behavior, right? So anyways, that's pretty much, the point. I kind of wanted to hit those different, examples just to show that, the kings, these are kings, right? Remember that. And, that's our lineage, and that's our bloodline, right? So that's why the scriptures talk about how the things that are written aforetime are written for our learning, right? So we help to adopt that sort of mindset, and put off the ways of this world, because those ways of this world, and even the people that have some kind of status in this world, that way is not proper. That way is not actually benefiting you. That way doesn't bring you it doesn't bring you closer to the Lord. Those are the ways of death, right? So anyways, that's pretty much the point. But Lord's will, this lesson was just quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.